Me girls, doodle let me go. Hurrah! Me yellow girls, doodle let me go. Whoa! Doodle let me go, me girls, doodle let me go. Hurrah! Me yellow girls, doodle let me go. Hey, please. Me girls. What? Are we so back? Is it the Moby-Dick read-along part 3? Welcome back. I'm back. I've been gone for a little while. I can tell you all about it. I'm sorry if any of y'all have been waiting very, very long. I guess I in a way warned you in the announcement video when I said this. That's the only date I'll plan. So that's it. And then from then on, we're flown in the ocean, like I said. When I said that, I was not lying. I've been, well, I don't know. I could tell you all about it. I could tell you all about my adventures in the foothills of the Himalayan mountains. I could tell you all about how I've been blown by the winds of life. I can tell you about the Sasquatch tribe that took me in outside of Portland. I know one viewer who would be particularly delighted to hear about that. But I'm not going to tell you about that. And instead, I think we should just jump back into Moby-Dick to part 3 of our read-along. For one thing, I've had some really, really kind messages from y'all missing the series while I've been gone and walking on tightropes between buildings. And also, for one thing, thank you for those messages. Those have been very, very kind. And I'm so happy y'all have been enjoying this book. The second thing is that 2 of my best friends have started reading Moby-Dick, and one of them has been watching the series and asked me to continue. And I was like, you know what? Mwah, I'll do it because I love doing this, but I've had health things that have prevented me from doing booktube videos is the lame response, but don't worry about me, I'm fine. And I just think that we should get right back into it. So when we last I guess saw each other, we had just finished seeing Queequeg and Ishmael approach the Pequod, and today's first chapter, chapter 21, is going aboard. So the adventure is getting underway, and in the format of these videos, I'm just going to continue going chapter by chapter. What I've been doing now that I realize this is I'm literally turning every single page of this book in front of you and talking about what I want to talk about. So this is a very in-depth way to go about it. As you can see also, I'm back in my little fairy elven boudoir because using the camera, the 60 FPS camera that I was for the first 2 episodes was killing my storage. And I figure y'all aren't here for the production quality. You know, you're here for... well, I mean, you're probably here for Herman Melville, but maybe you're also here to talk about Moby-Dick with me, and I figured here's as good a place as any. So, chapter 21, going aboard. We start this chapter with portents, with ominous doings from Elijah, who, as Harold Bloom will tell you in his wonderful video about Moby-Dick, on the YouTube channel Electric Serial, will tell you that Elijah's name of a prophet. We have lots of biblical names, Ishmael, Ahab. And Elijah approaches Queequeg and Ishmael. And the first thing I want to draw our attention to in this chapter is how good Melville is at dialogue. So I'll start reading it real quick. It was nearly 6 o'clock, but only gray in perfect misty dawn when we drew nigh the wharf. There are some sailors running ahead there if I see right, said I to Queequeg. It can't be shadows. She's off by sunrise, I guess. Come on. Avast, cried a voice, whose owner, at the same time coming close behind us, laid a hand upon both our shoulders, and then insinuating himself between us, stood stooping forward a little in the uncertain twilight, strangely peering from Queequeg to me. It was Elijah. Going aboard? Hands off, will you, said I. Looky here, said Queequeg, shaking himself. Go away. I don't know why that's my Queequeg voice. He sounds like the most white person, ironically. Looky, go away. Ain't going aboard, then? Yes, we are, said I. But what business is that of yours? Do you know, Mr. Elijah, that I consider you a little impertinent? No, I wasn't aware of that, said Elijah, slowly and wonderingly looking from me to Queequeg with the most unaccountable glances. Elijah, said I, you will oblige my friend and me by withdrawing. We are going to the Indian and Pacific Oceans and would prefer not to be detained. You be coming back before breakfast. He's cracked, Queequeg, said I. Come on. Hulloa! Cried stationary Elijah, hailing us when we had removed a few paces. And I'm not doing the best job of it, but I love the fact that Herman Melville is so socially acutely aware. We're about to get into a lot of, and we already have gotten into a bit of his his starings into the cosmos. And when he does that, he can be very ecstatic, and in a way that is almost removed from polite social, circles, or really just social behavior in general. But he clearly understands it when he writes these kind of funny bits of dialogue. For instance, this little detail of Ishmael saying to Queequeg, he's cracked. And then they walk on, and I guess Elijah just kind of stands there in a stupor and then says, "Oh!" and hails them again after he's been standing still, hailing us when we had removed a few paces. Anyways, and so, and he finally says to them, "Did you see anything looking like men going towards that ship a while ago?" And this is an interesting little piece of the book. So Elijah is kind of calling to the fact that Ishmael is seeing shapes moving towards the Pequod. And he kind of just continues giving these ominous things. But it's just a little detail to put on you for now, since it's going to come back later. But anyways, the chapter goes on, and they end up encountering this guy who's just sleeping on the ship, even just the descriptions of things happening in the world are just so beautifully expressed in this story. When they see this guy, they say, Ishmael says, he was thrown at whole length upon two chests, his face downward and enclosed in his folded arms. The profoundest slumber slept upon him. What a beautiful turn of phrase. The profoundest slumber slept upon him. I mean, for one thing, it's following, the iambic lull. A slumber sleeps upon someone. I mean, what a great way to express that. And then, of course, Queequeg and Ishmael sit on him and then smoke. And while Queequeg is smoking the tomahawk pipe, which is a dual purpose of the pipe and also like an axe, he's kind of brandishing it over this guy's sleeping skull, and he's saying, "Oh, this would be so easy to kill this guy." And Ishmael says he was going on with some wild reminiscences about his tomahawk pipe, which it seemed had in its two uses both brained his foes and soothed his soul. So if you're looking for interesting symbols and objects, start there. What in your life is the same tool by which you inflict violence upon others, but also gain some sort of peaceful tranquility of your own? You might think that there's no such thing in your life, but I guarantee you there is. I can think of a couple things, at least for myself. Some things that I've removed from my life and some things that I have not. And anyways, they go onto the board and onto the ship, and the crew starts coming on, and the final sentence we get is, "Meanwhile, Captain Ahab remained invisibly enshrined within his cabin." So all this while, Ahab's nowhere to be seen. Interesting things. Chapter 22 is entitled Merry Christmas. And on some of these chapters, I've started annotating. I will draw these little illustrations. The one for going aboard is just like a little ship in the harbor with a sunrise kind of coming up. But I haven't done that too much. Anywho, Merry Christmas is a great chapter title, and it's the least Christmassy probably chapter in any book that is titled Merry Christmas, because it's a lot of getting prepared to foresee. The only thing that I want to point out on this first page is is that as Ishmael describes them kind of getting hauled out from the wharf, he says, "And after the ever-thoughtful Charity had come off in a whaleboat with her last gifts, a nightcap for Stubb, the second mate, her brother-in-law, and a spare Bible for the steward. After all this, the two captains, Peleg and Bildad," yada yada, so on and so on. The only reason I want to call our attention to that is because we now say farewell to the last female character of Moby-Dick. So goodbye, Aunt Charity. Hello, ever-rolling depths and men aboard the ship. I think I've said in a previous Moby-Dick read-along video that this book can be called many, many things. But one thing that you'll never hear called is a feminist masterpiece. And then we get this section later on that is really quite sweet about Peleg and Bildad as they're preparing the ship. But I might be jumping the gun a little bit. First you get Bildad and Peleg just ordering everyone around the ship, getting underway. And the funny thing is the underway was spelled underway, W-E-I-G-H. And in my head I always thought that getting underway was W-A-Y. So this was kind of funny. Later on, when you get more great dialogue, and this is where I wrote the note that I said to you earlier, I wrote, Melville, for all his starry-eyed starings into the cosmos, is acutely socially aware, and displays it in these early dialogue interactions. Before his dialogue interactions become Shakespearean monologues, you actually get these really cool pieces of exchange between, for instance, Peleg and Bildad, or Ishmael and Queequeg. And the way that he even writes Peleg's dialogue here, is that the way that he, even the merchant service, he spells merchant M-A-R-C-H-A-N-T. It's just little details of Melville being a craftsman. You know, you can talk all you want about philosophy, you can talk all you want about plot structure, you can talk all you want about metaphors and symbolism, but at the end of the day, you got to be a writer. You got to write good sentences, sentence after sentence. At least I enjoy books that are written that way. I don't do a large share of enjoying books that are just have interesting ideas. I like books that are written deliciously. He calls Queequeg Quahog. That's pretty funny. And then he sets such a good scene. At last the anchor was up, the sails were set, and off we glided. It was a short, cold Christmas. By the way, Merry late Christmas to everyone watching. And as the short northern day merged into night, we found ourselves almost broad upon the wintry ocean, whose freezing spray cased us in ice, as in polished armor. I mean, he just evokes this imagery that's so good. The long rows of teeth on the bulwarks glistened in the moonlight, and like the white ivory tusks of some huge elephant, vast curving icicles depended from the bows. And, you know, I think when you read, you can get better over time at having your visual imagination be evoked. You can train that, and you can read sentences and start to try to imagine what is happening, even in sentences that aren't even describing imagery, but are just dialogue and ideas. They can take shape, they can take form in your mind as some sort of visual thing, and that will... that'll do a bunch of magic for you. That'll enhance your memory of it. It'll probably enhance your comprehension. It might even increase your speed, as weird as that sounds. It might sound like it's more work to visualize things you read. But I think it's the opposite. It seems that way, at least. And one of the things that makes Melville easily readable for me, even though the vocabulary can be so, nautical, for one thing, but expansive, biblical, he's so well read, even though the vocabulary can be outside of my range, I feel like my comprehension is still pretty high when I read it, which is so cool. Just get I just highlight little turns of phrases. He says later on, it then seemed to me many a pleasant haven was in store, and meads and glades so eternally vernal, so good, that the grass shot up by the spring, untrodden, unwilted, remains at midsummer. Eternally vernal, like what a great way to put it. And then the touching scene that I mentioned earlier happens, and in this scene, it's simply that Captain Peleg and Captain Bildad have to say goodbye to their ship. Bildad is a pilot. He's gotten a pilot's license in Nantucket, so he doesn't have to pay the fee, and he only pilots the ships that he brings out of the harbor. And as they go out, you just get this wonderful description of these people not really being able to leave this thing behind that they love so much, and wanting to stay, and needing to go. It's, I wrote down how they're as touched as old salts can be. I'll read it. Poor old Bildad lingered long, paced the deck with anxious strides, ran down into the cabin to speak another farewell word there, again came on deck and looked to windward, looked towards the wide and endless waters, only bounded by the far-off unseen eastern continents, looked towards the land, looked aloft, looked right, looked left, looked everywhere and nowhere, and at last, mechanically coiling a rope upon its pin, convulsively grasped stout Peleg by the hand, and holding up a lantern, for a moment stood gazingly heroically in his face, as much as to say, "Nevertheless, friend Peleg, I can stand it. Yes, I can." And one of my favorite things that any great artist can do is they can take a scene which might be wholly unfamiliar to you. In this case, probably to most people watching this, leaving port. I've been on boats before, but never seen like this, where like a whaling or like a vessel is getting underway. But, not most of us, but probably a lot of us can understand. Maybe some of you watching have been mothers taking their children to college and dropping them off and had the same feeling. Or maybe you've been that child. Hayao Miyazaki in his films does the same thing for me, where he will, through some sort of fantastical scene, convey a kind of experience that you have felt. So, for instance, like in Spirited Away by Hayao Miyazaki, there's this scene where one of the characters can kind of metamorphise into a dragon, and our heroine has to feed him a kind of medicine because he's dying and he's got this infected kind of parasite thing, and she's trying to get the medicine in between his canines and put it down its throat. And you might think that, well, I've never put medicine down a dragon's throat, but maybe you've tried to kind of take care of an animal in a way and tried to, give it medicine that's sick, and it's breaking your heart, and it's difficult, and whatever that emotional experience is, it's evoked by the art. And I feel like this scene of Peleg and Bildad saying farewell to the Pequod really does that for me. And then Peleg, it's so sweet. As for Peleg himself, he took it more like a philosopher. But for all his philosophy, there was a tear twinkling in his eye when the lantern came too near. Yeah. And there you get Melville poking some fun at Stoicism, and he mentions earlier on in the book, and I think it was Loomings when he's telling us about how he decides to go to sea always as a sailor and not as a cook or an officer or anything like that, and how you get kicked about a little bit by your superiors, and he says it takes a strong dose of Seneca and the Stoics to enable you to grin and bear it. So he's clearly well-versed in the Stoics. And by the way, he's well-versed in lots of readings that I'll bring up in this episode. Peleg says to them, "This day 3 years I'll have a hot supper smoking for you in old Nantucket." Another thing to keep in mind, think about that hot supper that's waiting for them 3 years from now at the end of this voyage. It's a good thing to keep in mind. And when mentioning Ahab, because the crew is concerned about Ahab's well-being, his mental health, I think Peleg says, or maybe it's Bildad, a pleasant sun is all he needs. Sunshine. We'll see how true that is very soon. And leaving, he keeps remembering things. Oh, the sail needles are in the green locker. That's just a great little throwaway line, but it's so good. And then this is one of the best lines that is a religious kind of shot. Don't wail at too much of Lord's days, men, but don't miss a fair chance either. That's rejecting God's good gifts. Heaven's good gifts. And that's just a great way to poke fun at, some religious people's propensity to rationalize their religion, or rationalize sort of their behavior and by justifying whatever they do with, the religion backs this. So, for instance, if it's Lord's Day, I'm not going to wail. But, I will also wail because, I'd be rejecting God's good gifts if I don't wail. And then finally, they get on their own little separate boat, and they depart. And this is the final scene we get of Peleg and Bildad. Ship and boat diverged. The cold, damp night breeze blew between. A screaming gull flew overhead. The two hulls wildly rolled. We gave 3 heavy-hearted cheers, and blindly plunged like fate into the lone Atlantic. What a great feeling of, yes, the adventure is underway. We've done it. 17 minutes and 58 seconds into this video, or whatever it is, and maybe there's an intro. And however many pages are we? 116. We're off. We're Mobian. I won't finish the rational conclusion of the second half of that word. And then we get chapter 23, the lee shore, which I'll read to you and then take a quick break to drink some water, in which we say farewell to Bulkington. Basically in this chapter, and what I'll start doing is probably just like summarizing it, is in this chapter, Ishmael or Melville, it's kind of, things start to get blurred here, basically dismisses Bulkington from the narrative. It's like he kills him, except, it's not clear that Bulkington drowns. But there is this one wonderful passage in this that I have to read, and I hope it's okay that I'm reading so much. If you really don't like me reading, I apologize, and you're welcome to just skip ahead. But it's too good to not say. And as I was going through these chapters and underlining, I was like trying to be really critical, because honestly, with a book like Moby-Dick, if you were to try to go through and read passages that have a crystal of extraordinary writing, or even sustained paragraphs of extraordinary writing, you would find probably something on every single page, which is maybe why I'm talking about something on every single page. But here's this one. Let me only say that it fared with him as with the storm-tossed ship that miserably drives along the leeward land. The port would fain give succor. Fain means happily. It's kind of older, English, and succor is like help. So the port would happily give help. The port is pitiful. Again, another word being used differently. Pitiful not meaning like a whimpering, sad thing, but giving pity. It is sympathizing. In the port is safety, comfort, hearthstone, supper, warm blankets, friends, all that's kind to our mortalities. But in that gale, the port, the land, is that ship's direst jeopardy. She must fly all hospitality. One touch of land, though it but graze the keel, would make her shudder through and through. With all her might she crowds all sail offshore. In doing so, fights against the very winds that fain would blow her homeward. Seeks all the lashed seas landlessness again. For refuge's sake, forlornly rushing into peril, her only friend, her bitterest foe. Wow. I mean, you just get that wonderful contrast of ideas. Melville loves these ideas, and here, it's what the port is to the sailors is all these wonderful things, is all these hospitalities. But what it is to the ship, what it is to Bulkington, for whom the land seems scorching to his feet, as he says, it's almost like it's death. And you really get that evoked very well with the line, though it but graze the keel, one touch of land would make her shudder through and through. Get dashed upon the rocks. And that there are theories that when Bulkington kind of gets yoinked out of the story like this, it says here, this 6-inch chapter is the stoneless grave of Bulkington. And that's why I said it's kind of unclear whether he dies or whether it's just the grave of him narratively. There are some theories that Melville had intended Bulkington to play a more important role in the story, and somehow or other realized what story he was actually writing and did away with him in a chapter this long. And in a chapter which is frequently cited in critical essays about Moby-Dick, including the introduction by Andrew Delbanco in the Penguin Classic, which some of y'all may be reading. And so that's chapter 23, and I'm going to take a quick break to get some water, but I'll be right back. And so we reach chapter 24, which is entitled The Advocate. And here's a chapter whose contents you'll find that I heartily disagree with. But despite the fact that I totally disagree with everything Melville says in this chapter, pretty much everything, I still love it. I still love this book. And it's a good distinction. It's something that I think Mr. Steve Tiberius Donahue and I discussed in our Tale of Genji discussion video, which is that you don't have to endorse a book to like it. Or even more specifically, you don't have to endorse all the contents of the book to say you really like the book. In this chapter, Ishmael endorses whaling, which I'm pretty sure every single person watching this who, if they stopped, or if you stopped, I don't know why I'm saying y'all or they, if you stopped for 60 seconds and closed your eyes and imagine, okay, why could whaling not be morally right? You'd probably be like, oh, obviously. But we're going to get to that. So, basically, Ishmael says, I gotta justify whaling to y'all, because whaling has got a bad rep today, and apparently the reputation that whaling had in the 1850s and 1860s was that it was this gross, kind of dirty profession of butchers and salty sailors. And Melville himself says, or Ishmael himself, doubtless one leading reason why the world declines honoring us whalemen is this. They think that, at best, our vocation amounts to a butchering sort of business. Make no mistake, whaling is butchering. Definitely is. And he even says that. He says, butchers we are, that is true. But butchers also, and butchers of the bloodiest badge, have been all martial commanders, whom the world invariably delights to honor. So here we have this contradiction. Martial commanders, people who are like higher-ups in warfare, are honored, and whalemen aren't. There's something wrong with that. Well, I agree, there is something wrong with that. And the thing that's wrong with that is that, and this is, I guess, I don't know, this is strangely a very obvious opinion, but it's not even a popular opinion, because we definitely support our own militaries. Every nation supports its military. But war as a human construct, as a thing that Homo sapiens does, is terrible. It's a terrible thing that we do. It's one of the worst qualities that exists in primates when they war. Some primates don't. Chimpanzees famously war against one another and have even committed genocide. Bonobos don't, because they live in a matriarchal feminist utopia. But we don't. We live in this psycho male world where people are going to war all the time. And so Ishmael's trying to get some honor by appealing to the fact that we honor, generals won't work on me personally. In the world we live in, we need to have militaries, but it's because we've created a shitty world. Oh, excuse my language. I very rarely curse on this channel, but I'm not feeling all that stoked about humanity at this time. And I always feel stoked about individuals, but not so much about humanity. And we'll get to that. I had underlined this. Triumphantly plant the sperm whale ship. Yes, basically... what is it exactly that I've underlined? I'm confused now. I see. No, Ishmael says that what he's about to say will triumphantly plant the sperm whale ship at least among the cleanliest things of this tidy earth. Okay, Ishmael. Okay. But even granting the charge in question to be true, what disordered, slippery decks of a whale ship are comparable to the unspeakable carrion of those battlefields from which so many soldiers return to drink in all ladies' plaudits? Very true. Killing a whale, which is a grotesque, terrible, violent, evil thing to do, to just slaughter a mammal with language, family structure, emotions, obviously a nervous system and physical pain, terrible thing to do if it's not necessary, and it's not necessary. Even then it wasn't necessary. In our world, we construct systems that make it necessary. So, for instance, if you don't have a car and you live in a certain part of America, it's necessary to have a car, but only because the world has been constructed in that way, and it wasn't always necessary, and so on. So, anyways, this reminded me of Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut, in which there's a scene in which Billy Pilgrim has just slept with. I wonder if it's his wife right after getting married. I believe it's been a couple years since I read it. And when he and she are in the afterglow of having sex, she turns to him lovingly and asks him about the war. What was it like to be fighting? And there's this just wonderfully cold sentence by Kurt Vonnegut that just says she was basically a child, and it was the most natural thing in the world for her to associate sex and war, or war and love. So the fact that Ishmael here talks about how ladies' plaudits basically are drunk in by soldiers is just a nice little micro insight that he's throwing around all the time. There's nothing romantic about killing each other. I know I'm telling you that. You who are my pacifist army. For what are the comprehensible terrors of man compared with the interlinked terrors and wonders of God? I'll read that one more time. What are the comprehensible terrors of man compared with the interlinked terrors and wonders of God? That's a cool idea. If we equate God to nature, which maybe Ishmael is doing, maybe he's not, but if we equate God to nature, and he is in this sense because he's saying kind of the wonders of God in his sense. There's a sperm whale and the kind of magisterial nature of a sperm whale and kind of the terror of the flukes pounding the ocean, and that's like the warfare to him is whatever. So if we say, okay, sperm whales are part of nature, the comprehensible terrors of man vastly outweigh all of the terrors of nature, tenfold. nature has never once in its entire history produced anything as incomprehensibly horrific as factory farming. I'll just say that. Anyways, moving on. This chapter is gonna get me riled up. I already know it. For many years past, the whale ship has been the pioneer in ferreting out the remotest and least parts of the earth. So, least known parts of the earth. There's a good thing that I like about whaling. It's an adventure thing. You get to experience parts of the world. One thing. And he goes on to just basically say that captains of whaling vessels are more adventurous than all of the captain cooks of the world, and he's just trying to, give them honor. And he's got these great turns of phrases throughout this. Of course, I disagree with this sentiment totally. But he talks about the heathenish sharked waters, and he says that people who are colonizing Pacific Islands and even Australia were only saved from starvation by the benevolent biscuit of a whale ship luckily dropping an anchor in their waters. Benevolent biscuit. Moby-Dick contains the words benevolent biscuit. Never forget that. That's so good. I like this sentence. If that double-bolted land Japan is ever to become hospitable, it is the whale ship alone to whom the credit will be due, for already she is on the threshold. I'll ask for Herman Melville for us reading this in the year 2025, the best year that we've ever had, ever. 2025 has been okay in some ways. But I'll ask for him. We have the benefit of hindsight, and we know that it really was not the whalers who opened Japan. It was U.S. Hollywood star Matthew Perry. You can look it up. If in the face of this you still declare that whaling has no aesthetically noble associations connected with it, then am I ready to shiver 50 lances with you there and unhorse you with a split helmet every time? I mean, I disagree with you, but man, if he tells me he's going to shiver 50 lances at me and split my helmet, how can I beat that? I can't write that well, so he's got me there. And then he goes on to do this great little rhetorical call and response. The whale has no famous chronicler. The whale no famous chronicler, you say? Who wrote the first account of our life, Leviathan, but mighty Job? And so on and that sort of thing going on all the way through. He keeps kind of pretending to be the reader, and at one point he gives some evidence, and his kind of admission on the reader's behalf is, grant it, since you cite it. And I love that expression, grant it, since you cite it. And if anyone ever is arguing with me and they bring up a piece of just factual evidence that supports their argument that I disagree with, I should just say, grant it, since you cite it. No dignity in whaling. Okay, here's a real critique. The hypothetical reader that Herman Melville is doing this kind of fake argument back and forth says, but say what you will, there's no real dignity in whaling. That's the criticism. That maybe would be my criticism. No dignity in whaling, this is Melville's response. The dignity of our calling, the very heavens attest. Cetus, I don't know if Cetus is pronounced Cetus or, I think it is Cetus, or Cetus, no, Cetus. Cetus? Cetus is a constellation in the south, no more. Interesting piece of logic. The heavens themselves attest to the dignity of whaling, of killing whales, because there's a constellation of a whale. So, by the transitive property, or whatever you want to call it, killing archers, or if there was a constellation of, a young girl in the springtime, then there would be dignity in murdering that child, because there's a constellation of it. There may be all the dignity in the world with whales and the beauty of a massive mammal that can produce complex music under the ocean that reverberates for miles. That does not mean there's dignity in slaughtering them. Anyways, so of course I disagree with this chapter. But we get this final paragraph that is, you can't hate this guy. And as for me, if by any possibility there be any as yet undiscovered prime thing in me, if I shall ever deserve any real repute in that small but high-hushed world which I might not be unreasonably ambitious of. And what that high-hushed world is, I'm not entirely clear on. Is it literary repute? Is it whaling glory? I don't know. If hereafter I shall do anything that upon the whole a man might rather have done than to have left undone, if at my death my executors, or more properly my creditors, find any precious MSS manuscript in my desk, then here I prospectively ascribe all the honor and the glory to whaling. For a whale ship was my Yale College and my Harvard. So I kind of like the sentiment of you can learn most things there is to know in life by diving into a subject, by diving into something, diving into a profession or whatever, if you're looking for the humanity in it. This is Yale College and it's Harvard. And one thing that's so fun to point out in hindsight, when he says, or more properly creditors, if my executors, or more properly my creditors, that's pretty funny, find any precious manuscript in my desk. And they did. They did find a precious manuscript in his desk. They found one of the only other masterpieces. Well, I don't know. It depends on your opinion. But a lot of people think that Melville's two masterpieces are Moby-Dick and Billy Budd, Sailor. Kind of like a novella. And that was discovered in his desk. And I just wonder if any part of Melville's brain was thinking about this when he kind of wrote this thing that he must have known was pretty good and put it in his desk. So my final point on The Advocate is Melville is unconvincing, but he's still very likable. What are your thoughts on whaling? You know, if you think whaling is justifiable, I want to hear why. You know, we can disagree. We probably will disagree, but I want to hear your arguments. I'll stay open-minded for why you think that whaling could have some sort of glory in it. I don't want to ever be completely closed-minded, even on things that I think are very strong in me, like my aversion to killing. Anyways, whenever I finish a chapter from now on, I'm just going to quietly allow there to be a little edit, which I normally don't love to do, but I think it's good for me to take a break from all my excited ramblings and smiling, to let my jaw rest and to drink some water. So we'll return with the postscript. So chapter 25 is the postscript, and it begins with this idea that I really do agree with. He says, "In behalf of the dignity of whaling, I would fain advance naught but substantiated facts." And just as a little pointer, not a pointer, but just a little detail, throughout the book we do have sentences like, "I would fain advance naught but substantiated facts." And today we don't often say not, ought, and fain. But if you get a grasp on those three words, I promise Moby-Dick's going to be so easy for you to read. Not meaning nothing but, ought being anything at all, and fain meaning happily. But after embattling his facts, an advocate, this is what I like, but after embattling his facts, an advocate who should wholly suppress a not unreasonable surmise, which might tell eloquently upon his cause, such an advocate, would he not be blameworthy? This is another sentence construction that can be, I think it's tricky for students and for people who maybe don't read that often, or maybe don't read Victorian literature, or like, for instance, Trollope uses this sentence construction all the time, where there's this kind of double negative. An advocate who should wholly suppress a not unreasonable. So if it's not unreasonable, it's reasonable. It's this kind of polite way to say it, because you don't want to say like, oh, my thing is reasonable. But it's polite to say, oh, it's not unreasonable to say, you know. So, but those constructions can get tricky when they pile up. And another thing, if you get a handle on Moby-Dick, it's going to be super easy. There's this little cute thing that he says about the use of sperm oil. He says, "Certain I am, however, that a king's head is solemnly oiled at his coronation, even as a head of salad. Can it be, though, that they anoint it with a view of making its interior run well, as they anoint machinery?" And that's just playfulness, just good old-fashioned playfulness, which I don't want to say it ever totally leaves Moby-Dick, but it sometimes does kind of leave Moby-Dick. But it is very present. It's present for most of the time. You get these little cute sentences like that. As if, you know, anointing the king's head with a little bit of sperm oil makes his brain run better and him a better head of state. There's this word down here that I star words that I don't know, that a man probably has got a quaggy spot in him somewhere. Quaggy? It's like in the Spouter Inn where he's talking about the painting and he says it's a boggy, soggy, squitchy picture truly. And I'm like, squitchy? Is that even a real word? This sentence is funny. "In truth, a mature man who uses hair oil, unless medicinally, that man has probably got a quaggy spot in him somewhere." Listen, if you're a guy who uses hair oil, don't let Melville get you down. And plus, he's joking, I think. I don't think he has a mean bone in his body. Anyways, it's just this... he basically says, "Think of that, you loyal Britons, the Britons. we whalemen supply our kings and queens with coronation stuff, and so on. And then we get chapter 26, Knights and Squires. And what you get in Knights and Squires chapter 26 is just this fantastic, living, fully realized portrait of the first mate, Starbuck. And Starbuck is he's just a stand-up guy. He loves drinking coffee, and he has these dreams of building this global empire of caffeine, and I think he's got something going for him. He basically even talks about how Starbuck, who's only around 30 years old, a very young man, has been weathered by this sea, and he's lost all of his excess. Only some 30 arid summers he had seen. Those summers had dried up all his physical superfluousness. But this, his thinness, so to speak, seemed no more the token of wasting anxieties and cares than it seemed the indication of any bodily blight. It was merely the condensation of the man. What a great way to describe a person who's been, kind of any person. If you've ever watched a documentary about existing hunter-gatherer societies and what human bodies look when we're kind of living in the way that evolution kind of adapted us to live. Not saying that that's the right way to live or the wrong way to live, but the way that evolution adapted us to live was, foraging bands of 30 to 50 people with close social bonds, kind of just eating nuts and dings and trees and hunting every once in a while. And when people do that, their bodies look like Starbucks. They're condensed. There's no excess, but they don't look unhealthy, even though they might be lanky. It's interesting. And we get all of these descriptions of Starbuck as being a very brave, courageous whaler. But then we get this, and it's just Melville being subtle. Outward portents and inward presentiments were his. And if at times these things bent the welded iron of his soul, much more did his faraway domestic memories of his young Cape wife and child. So Starbuck has a wife and child. So the memory of them tend to bend him still more from the original ruggedness of his nature, and open him still further to those latent influences which, in some honest-hearted men, restrain the gush of daredevil daring, so often evinced by others in the more perilous vicissitudes of the fishery, meaning that some people who are married and have children, it takes away the bravery. And this is what Starbuck says: "I will have no man in my boat," said Starbuck, "who is not afraid of a whale." By this he seemed to mean not only that the most reliable and useful courage was that which arises from the fair estimation of the encountered peril, but that an utterly fearless man is a far more dangerous comrade than a coward. That's such a great idea. And that's how I've always felt about courage in a way too. And maybe I'm just a coward, but I've always felt that courage is the ability to accept when is the time to take the calculated risk and go at it fully. If now is the time, if I've kind of estimated, and not just to rush blindly into any situation. That just has always felt like stupidity to me. And in stories when I was a kid that have lauded courage, examples in which it was just blind stupidity, I never found that inspiring. And the examples in which a person was, under siege in their castle, and the last, great warrior left, and jumps down onto the gate bridge and fights, 1,000 enemies by himself. That even though that is also suicide, that feels like real courage to me in a way, if that makes sense. So Starbuck seems to be kind of that more estimating, calculated, courageous man. And he says even that in him courage was not a sentiment, but simply a thing useful to him, and always at hand upon all mortally practical occasions. Gosh, I just want to read everything to y'all, but I shan't. The only other detail that's in there that's very interesting is he says that I won't read it. He says essentially Starbuck knows the doom of the sailors. It's his job to kill whales, not the other way around. And his own father has died in the whale fishery, and so did his brother. So Starbuck knows what he's up against. And then we see that all of his bravery in Starbuck, while is great at confronting these kinds of, as Melville puts it, he can withstand the ordinary irrational horrors of the world like whales. He cannot withstand the more terrific, because more spiritual terrors, which sometimes menace you, from the concentrating brow of an enraged and mighty man. And that enraged and mighty man, of course, is Captain Ahab. He's saying that Starbuck is built for whaling and not to oppose a demagogue. Because he has to be built that way. Starbuck as a character cannot be a person who can stand up to demagogue if we are to have Ahab as we are to have him. But Ishmael wants to defend this flaw in Starbuck, this his inability to kind of stand up to the oppressor. And he says this: men may seem detestable as joint stock companies and nations. Knaves, fools, and murderers there may be. Men may have mean and meager faces, but man and the ideal is so noble and so sparkling, such a grand and glowing creature, that over any ignominious, I think, blemish in him, all his fellows should run to throw over their costliest robes. Just meaning that, sure, as individuals, we are nasty, brutish, and short things, or whatever you want to call us, but humanity is this noble, sparkling thing that if any blemish is revealed in us, if any flaw, all the rest of us should cover it up with costly robes. Interesting sentiment. Yeah, I think, God, there's just so much good writing in here. But this is a very humanist chapter. This is and most of you watching are probably humanists. I'll go and play my hand and say that I'm not a humanist. I don't feel that human beings are intrinsically have some sort of special thing that differentiates them from nature, from animals, or from rocks or whatever. I mean, obviously that there is gradients, but I think that humans are just part of this gradient. We live in this world. Look, everything in this room is unnatural. And in this world that is human-made convinces us that we're the only being like this, and that we're so not animals. For one thing, we behave like animals socially. You just have to see a group of people walk past you of any age and to know that people behave like animals. Not in an evil way, but just that's how we behave. And we are a gradient also of it's easy to think that humans are so different because there are no Homo erectus or Homo flores or Neanderthals or anything like that, because we've killed every single other one of them to extinction. We genocided everything we touch, even to the point where today, if there is a group of humans who have, slight different aesthetic difference, whatever it may be, toenail shape, ear size, skin color, that is enough to completely exterminate a group. So, you have a tiny aesthetic difference. That's our species. I don't love that about us. That's something I do not love about humanity. I love other things about us. I love our ability to use this giant-ass brain that we have to find out what's right and wrong, and live by what's right and wrong, and not what is evolved or what is natural. Nature is not necessarily right or wrong, but we can, I think, determine that. And I love that humans do that. Some humans do. Some humans try to find out what's right about the world, what's wrong, and they really try. They don't just kind of take what's feels right and wrong based on how they've been raised, but they actually look at the most fundamental foundations of their society they've been raised in and question them. And this is the most important thing, is that when they find that they're wrong, they leave them behind. And they live by their lights. So the twofold thing, my favorite thing about humanity is just that some humans with our big brains can find out what's right and wrong and then even live by them. And that's incredibly rare to ever find a person like that in this world. But most people aren't like that, And Ishmael in this chapter sees humanity as a noble, sparkling thing that we all should throw our costly robes over. And do you agree with that? I obviously I don't. I think I agree with that. I think compassion is always the answer. I don't think that we should point and chastise. Well, not chastise. You can chastise bad behavior. You can chastise evil. But it's very easy to see evil in this world, I think, to see flaws. And of course, with Starbucks, flaw is not an evil thing. But just going along with the ideas, I think it's very easy to, for instance, look historically at evil regimes, evil practices, evil systems, and say everyone who's complicit in the systems, who is benefiting from them, is just a shitbag. Is just a terrible person. Excuse all my language in this video. It's so funny that I'm cursing all of a sudden. But it's easy to say that people, all men, throughout virtually all of human history, have treated women as property, for whom women was their property. If they had women being the property of husbands, women being the property of fathers. It's easy to look at those men and say, oh, they're just terrible people, but they're just living by the society's customs, and they just didn't question them, just in the same way that everyone today doesn't really question what they're doing. And it doesn't seem clear to me that everyone today who is doing the right thing and valuing, obviously, women as human beings, it doesn't seem clear to me that all of them are just naturally born good people. It seems like they were raised by a culture that has found that good piece of morality and taught it, which is awesome. But culture doesn't necessarily teach good things. And it's not even clear to me that culture is progressing necessarily. And of course, as you've already seen in this video, I've already mentioned factory farming, and of course, my belief is that our world's participation in factory farming is very, very, very much analogous to all of the other evil atrocities committed by humans. I'm not saying they are the same thing as any of those atrocities, but they're totally analogous. There's parallels. Suppression of compassion being one of them. One's ability to put it far away. One's ability to rationalize. Maybe that's the worst part about humanity, is that we can just explain it. There are rational sounding reasons for everyone watching this video, and I'm sure most of you who watch this video, do eat meat. And there are rational sounding reasons why, what it means to my culture, to my family, what it means to my health, and I got to get my protein, and all these things that we've been fed, we can always find a rationale for why we participate in something evil. But I don't think we should throw our costliest robes over it. I think we should examine it and try to find out what is right and wrong, and then live by it. Obviously, that's my belief. Anywho, I'm sorry that I'm just proselytizing veganism, essentially. Just something to think about. Moby-Dick, man. Moby-Dick makes you think. And that was chapter 26, Knights and Squires. This is chapter 27, Knights and Squires. Stubb was the second mate. We get now basically we just get about Stubb and Flask. And by the way, I love, just to go back into the writing, I really digress there. Also, if I would like to hear your thoughts on everything I just said, if you disagree or agree, email me or have a comment. There's no judgment. We shouldn't chastise things that we think are wrong. We should talk about them. Quick note, in the heat of the moment, I did misspeak. I think it is okay to chastise things we think are wrong, but I don't think we ought to chastise each other, because we're all wrong about so many things, and it's okay. I believe in the passionate, loving discourse more than I do about chastising. But, if you think something's wrong and you chastise it, sometimes that's the right thing. Sometimes not, I don't know. I guess my final quote is by Thomas Jefferson. Historically not a great guy, but good quote. When he said, I've never known a man who ever changed his opinion because he was argued with. I believe that's true. I want to change people's opinions on things that I think that they're doing that could be wrong, knowing that most people I talk to are good people, and they probably don't know that what they're doing might be wrong. And the way I want to do that is not by arguing, it's by talking and chatting compassionately. So that's why I want you to send me an email. Anyways, point over, back to the video, back to me being spry, not so freaking tired. Bye. And have conversations, because I don't know, I'm one of those poor, helpless bastards who really thinks love is the answer. And I will spend my life writing terrible songs if that's what it takes to champion love. Go animals. The final chapter, or the final sentence in this chapter, thou who in all thy mighty earthly marchings ever callest thy selectest champions from the kingly commons, bear me out in it, O God. Chapter 27. Stubb was the second mate. And I think I maybe even did this bit before, but Melville always has these apotheosis endings to chapters with big exclamation points and just rolling, velvety, delicious, big, grand, trumpety, ticker tape sentences, and then boom, tiny claws start of the next chapter. Awesome. I love that. I love that just piece of writing. It's a great contrast. Stubb is this easy, lax, genial, amiable guy. He doesn't think too hard about things. He's one of those people who's cheerful, not because of Montaigne's idea of Montaigne's famous quote, the surest sign of wisdom is constant cheerfulness. Stubb's not wise, I think, in that way. Stubb is just like that. His nature is this very easy thing. Long usage had for this Stubb converted the jaws of death to an easy chair. That sort of thing. He's just kind of very used to whaling. He's just full of a natural equanimity. Maybe that is wisdom. I don't know. Maybe you don't have to go through the crucible of suffering and doubt and nihilism and dread and existentialism and atheism to reach a sort of spiritual or maybe non-spiritual hope and optimism. Maybe you can just smoke a pipe. What perhaps with other things made Stubb such an easygoing, unfearing man, so cheerily trudging off with the burden of life in a world full of grave peddlers, all bowed to the ground with their packs, what helped to bring about that almost impious good humor of his, that thing must have been his pipe. For like his nose, his short black little pipe was one of the regular features of his face. You would almost as soon have expected him to turn out of his bunk without his nose than without his pipe. He kept a whole row of pipes there, ready loaded, stuck in a rack, within easy reach of his hand, and whenever he turned in, he smoked them all out in succession, lighting one from the other to the end of the chapter, then loading them again to be in readiness anew. For when Stubb dressed, instead of first putting his legs into his trousers, he put his pipe into his mouth. Awesome characterization. I love it. And we'll see more of Stubb in his pipe. There's also this hilarious sentence right after this where he says, I say this continual smoking must have been one cause at least. For everyone knows that this earthly air, whether ashore or afloat, is terribly infected with the nameless miseries of the numberless mortals who have died exhaling it. So lots of people die exhaling fresh air. And then he says Stubb's tobacco smoke might have operated as a sort of disinfecting agent. Whatever. Like, that's just funny to me. And it's, again, that's just Melville's good-naturedness, but our hindsight, I don't think Melville really knew about what tobacco was doing to people. Maybe he did, I don't know. And then we get a description of Flask, the third mate, and Flask is essentially like a short guy, and he's very pugnacious concerning whales. He's kind of cruel. He's kind of a cruel, shorter person. Not to be Randy Newman-esque and say that, short people don't have any reason to live or anything like that, but this short character is little waggish in the matter of whales. He's kind of too facetious about the whole ordeal. He doesn't have any of the same reverence for whales that Ishmael does or anyone else. One thing that's fun is that Starbuck, Queequeg is first pick when it comes to harpooners. Starbuck, first mate, chooses Queequeg. And then we get Tashtego, who's an Indian from Gayhead, the most westerly promontory of Martha's Vineyard, which is cool. And then Dagu is an African harpooner, and Tashtego is the harpooner for Stubb, and Dagu is Flask's harpooner. And then basically, the idea of like the harpooners is that all of them are like, the term that Melville would use and also critique would be that they're just kind of the savages from the islands. But they have a kind of like humor and humanity to them that everyone else has. And, the language of Moby-Dick, needless to say, written in the 1850s when talking about people who are not white Americans. Of course, today, if anyone said it, would be like a signpost that person is racist. But there's not a mean bone in any of the writing that Melville's writing here. At least not that I could find. Of course, I'm a white person. You never know. I could be missing things. But yeah, the description of all these guys is just classic, great visuals of Melville's. And I'm looking through all of the words that I don't know. An anarchist, klutz, prelusive. But anyways, essentially we get the cast and crew introduced. And then chapter 28, Ahab. Ahab! For several days after leaving Nantucket, nothing above hatches was seen of Captain Ahab. Which is kind of a strange thought to maybe the modern reader who, like me, knows nothing about the nautical world, and I would think that like the captain is like essential to essentially the survival of the ship, to how things run, to the whole system. But apparently not, because we have three very capable, competent first mates. And Ahab, moody, skulking Ahab, is still in his cabin. And Ishmael starts to feel really, really spooked by this. And Elijah's portentous comments start to get to him. He says that basically his disquietude almost becomes perturbations. And this was strangely heightened at times by the ragged Elijah's diabolical incoherences uninvitingly recurring to me, with a subtle energy I couldn't have not before conceived of. But poorly could I withstand them, much as in other moods I was almost ready to smile at the solemn whimsicalities at that outlandish prophet of the wharves. And here again we see the moods of Ishmael, and we're going to get the moods of Ahab. And people being in different moods is a very common running theme of this book. And one of the great kind of insights I gleaned from it is how one's accepting of those moods leads to the deepest, richest life. Was one of the kind of ideas maybe of the book. And I don't want to say Melville argues for it, but it's that idea I think it shows up a lot. I don't wholeheartedly agree with it, but kind of like it's been a theme of this video. I don't really wholeheartedly agree with a lot in this book, but it doesn't really reduce my love for it. Nothing can reduce love. Love is untouchable. Sometimes every once in a while I say a thing, I feel like that was a Michael K. Vaughan spirit thing. I don't know. In fact, when Michael K. Vaughan made a video on Moby-Dick, because I've tried to watch every video the booktubers make on Moby-Dick, he had this edition, so maybe his spirit does get siphoned through me every once in a while. And then Ishmael is on the deck and doing his work, and one day it was one of those less lowering, but still gray and gloomy enough mornings of the transition, when with a fair wind the ship was rushing through the water with a vindictive sort of leaping and melancholy rapidity. Notice that word vindictive. The Pequod is vindictively leaping with melancholy rapidity. And only a couple chapters earlier, in the lee shore, we have the sentence that on that shivering winter's night, the Pequod thrust her vindictive bows into the cold, malicious waves. Melville rarely uses a word twice. I mean, it's crazy. I think I read a statistic about Moby-Dick, despite having almost 250,000 words in it, uses a unique word that is used only once in the whole book, like one every 12 words or something insane like that. I read that and I found it almost impossible to believe, considering, just English grammar, the, a, on, because, so, what, all those things. But I don't know, his vocabulary is expensive. Anyways, Pequod's rushing through vindictively. That as I mounted to the deck at the call of the forenoon watch, so soon as I leveled my glance towards the taffrail, foreboding shivers ran over me. Reality outran apprehension. Captain Ahab stood upon his quarterdeck. He's there, Captain Ahab! And in classic fashion, I don't know who it was. It may have been Nathaniel Philbrick in Why Read Moby-Dick, which is a book I kind of read in preparation for this read-along. He says something along the lines of, Captain Ahab's delayed appearance gives the appearance more power. Kind of like, I guess the shark in Jaws. We don't see the shark for a long time. Or I forget what other villains are like that. But lots of villains show up only at the end of the second act in their iconic villains. And then they get 15 minutes of screen time or whatever, which is kind of cool. Or it's in Star Wars, Darth Vader is their scene 2 or something like that. It's it's scary as Darth Vader, but you don't get the big entrance. And this is a big entrance. And then you just get this. Honestly, if you got Project Gutenberg, if you got our copy, this whole description of Ahab is just so good. I've underlined so much of it. I'll just point out a couple of sentences. There's this scar that Ahab has running from at least his hairline, coming down his cheek, down his neck, and then disappearing into his clothes. And Ishmael's wondering, well, where does that go? Where does that come from? Why is that there? And he says it's like a lightning bolt that has struck a tree that travels from the topmost limbs down through the roots and into the earth and escapes from the tree, leaving it still alive. And even saying, leaving the tree still greenly alive, but branded. Greenly alive. So playful. I know it seems the easiest thing in the world to write that when you're reading it, but if it doesn't occur to you, it's impossible to write. How do you make an idea occur to you? There's a mystery for you, for all you creative people, for all you people who study aesthetics. I could talk about that forever, but nevertheless, the old sea traditions, the immemorial credulities, popular invested, basically a member of the crew, with preternatural powers of discernment, so that no white sailor seriously contradicted him when he said that if ever Captain Ahab should be tranquilly laid out, which might hardly come to pass, so he muttered, then whoever should do that last office for the dead would find a birthmark on him from crown to sole. Meaning that they think that at least some of the superstitious crew members think that scar goes just all the way down his body onto the bottoms of his feet or bottom of his foot. So cool. And he doesn't even notice Ishmael at first, his ivory leg, his whalebone leg. It had previously come to me that this ivory leg had at sea been fashioned from the polished bone of sperm whale's jaw. Okay, sperm whale's jaw, the sperm whale bit his leg off, now he has a leg made of a sperm whale's jaw, kind of funny. Aye, he was dismasted off Japan, said the old gay-head Indian once, but like his dismasted craft, he shipped another mast without coming home for it. He has a quiver of them. Meaning, it's like he has a quiver of spare legs for him or whenever he needs them. And I'm skipping over just so many great pieces of writing. And for instance, these holes are drilled in the wood of the kind of top deck. Is that called the quarterdeck? I need to brush up on my nautical terminology, but so that Ahab can kind of plant his peg and hold one of the shrouds. Shrouds kind of being one of the lines, the ropes that go up to the masts, or to the sails. And so he can kind of watch over his crew, watch over the sea, and so on. But the Pequod was only making a passage now, not regularly cruising. So the Pequod is going through these waters, kind of going southward towards more tropical waters to go to whaling cruising grounds. So they're not really in a position yet to lower for whales. Nearly all whaling preparatives needing supervision, the mates were fully competent to, so that there was little or nothing out of himself to employ or excite Ahab. So Ahab's pretty much without a job. He doesn't have anything to do now. And thus chase away. So basically there was little or nothing for him to do, and thus chase away for that one interval the clouds that layer upon layer were piled upon his brow, as ever all clouds choose the loftiest peaks to pile themselves upon. Oh, so good. Clouds choose the loftiest peaks, and Ahab is the guy, and so he's the cloudiest. That's a more beautiful reinforcing of the idea that the intellectuals are miserable and stupid people are happy and blissfully ignorant, which is not true about the world. But this is such an interesting point here, because he describes how the fact that Ahab doesn't really have anything to do contributes to the fact that he doesn't have any excitement to chase away the clouds. And this reminded me so much of Montaigne. I'm reading the collected essays of Montaigne right now, and I'm loving them. And Montaigne talks about this exact idea in a very short essay called Of Idleness, where essentially he's just saying that, idleness allows weeds to grow in the human mind. For the soul to really be in force, it has to be focused upon something. And he even cites a quote that's something along the lines of, he who is everywhere is nowhere. I'll read you this quote from Montaigne as part of my series in which I read you every single thing ever written. Lately, when I retired to my home, this is Montaigne when he kind of retired and decided to just kind of be a reader in some way, determined so far as possible to bother about nothing except spending the little life I have left in rest and seclusion. It seemed to me that I could do my mind no greater favor than to let it entertain itself in full idleness and stay and settle in itself. Interesting idea. Sounds good enough, I'm going to be in idleness and I'm going to settle into myself, which I hoped it might do more easily now, having become weightier and riper with time. I hope my mind becomes weightier and riper with time. But I find that, on the contrary, like a runaway horse, it gives itself 100 times more trouble than it took for others. Its mind gives himself more trouble, and gives birth to so many chimeras and fantastic monsters, one after another, without order or purpose, that in order to contemplate their ineptitude and strangeness at my pleasure, I have begun to put them in writing, hoping in time to make my mind ashamed of itself. It's a great passage from Montaigne, and I bring it up because I was thinking as I was reading Montaigne's essays that, oh my gosh, it's so Melvillian. Or really, should I say that Melville is so Montaignian? And I was wondering, I wonder if Melville read the collected essays of Montaigne, because they're so similar, both in personality. They're so genial, amiable, likable, loving, compassionate, just great companionship. Reading them, it just feels like you're with a good friend. They have that but even stylistically, they're both so elusive. They both talk about other things. They're both constantly drawing from sources. I even skipped over a quote. Montaigne is always talking about these Roman and Greek orators and philosophers, and Lucretius and Epicurus and all that. While I was wondering this, I kind of went back to the extracts. I don't even know why. Excuse me, only to find that Herman Melville cited Montaigne's Apology for Roman Saban from the collected essays, so he almost certainly read him, which is so cool. I feel like my literary world map is getting filled out, and like all of the allusions that are going from book to book are just starting very slowly to make sense. I'm starting to make sense of the literary world, which is just feels great. So thank you, BookTube, for helping me accomplish that. And then this final paragraph. And remember, they're heading into tropical waters. Nevertheless, ere long, the warm, warbling persuasiveness of the pleasant holiday weather we came to seemed gradually to charm him from his mood. Ahab. For as when the red-cheeked dancing girls, April and May, trip home to the wintry misanthropic woods, even the barest, ruggedest, most thunder-cloven old oak will at least send forth some few green spouts to welcome such glad-hearted visitants. So Ahab did, in the end, a little respond to the playful allurings of that girlish air. More than once did he put forth the faint blossom of a look, which in any other man would have soon flowered out in a smile. That is one of my favorite paragraphs in anything I've ever read. I swear. It's every sentence in that, the warmth of it, the kindness of it, the humanity of it. It's like what Trollope said in The Warden, when he's criticizing Charles Dickens, ironically enough. But he says that what Dickens, Mr. Popular Sentiment in The Warden is called, what Dickens fails to realize is that there is no unalloyed evil in this world. There's no unalloyed good in this world, and there is no evil that does not contain some seed of that which is goodly. That's a quote by Trollope. And when I read that by Trollope, I was like, I really like this author. And of course it comes through in Trollope's writing, but it's here in Ahab too. You think Captain Ahab and you think monomaniacal, almost unhuman demagogue. And it's not who he is in the book. He has his humanities. Someone even says Ahab has his humanities earlier on, Peleg or Bildad. But here it is, April and May, tripping along into the wintry misanthropic woods. He, like an old thunder-cloven oak, puts forth the faint blossom of a look, which in any other man would have soon flowered out in a smile. And if any of you have ever known or worked with or spent time around or had a teacher who is also one of these people who, for some reason or other, maybe sad things outside of their control, or maybe it's because they were just kind of had a bad attitude, just never really smiled, never really showed happiness. Sometimes the winds of life that blow wintry, terrible, chilling ice storms, sometimes blow tropical, cold, warm breezes, whatever you want to call it. They blow nice things upon us, and sometimes those people get a gust of goodness, and they can't help but kind of express that, and it feels good, even if they're never going to be a person who's positive or embraces any of the best parts of the world. I don't know if anyone's totally irresistible to goodness. I don't know. I'm too much of an optimist to believe that anyone is. Anyways. Chapter 29. Enter Ahab to him stub. 2 more chapters left. So sad. And for some of y'all, thank God, mercy, clemency in this video. But I guess people who are still watching this must like the length or have some sort of crazy, I don't know, enjoyment of me just rambling on and on and on about this book. This just begins with this beautiful opening passage. In this chapter, we're going to get the first dialogue that Ahab ever speaks. But before we get that, we get the Pequod, a kind of description of the new landscape it's going into. The icebergs are astern, meaning they're behind them. They're going into these new places. The warmly cool, clear ringing, perfumed, overflowing, redundant days, were as crystal goblets of Persian sherbet, heaped up, flaked up with rose-water snow. The starred and stately knights seemed haughty dames in jeweled velvets, nursing at home in lonely pride the memory of their absent conquering earls, the golden helmeted sons. For sleeping man, 'twas hard to choose between such winsome days and such seducing nights. But all the witcheries of that unwaning weather did not mean... God, this is so good. I'm sorry. It's just so good. But all the witcheries of that unwaning weather did not merely lend new spells and potencies to the outward world. Inward they turned upon the soul, especially when the still mild hours of eve came on. Then memory shot her crystals as the clear ice most forms of noiseless twilights. I have never read writing like this. I've never read writing that does that to me. I cannot. I mean, poetry kind of does that, but poetry in a way, I'm a little bit more at arm's length than I am with Ishmael's voice. Again, for all the same affable qualities that I keep bringing up, it reaches me so much. I mean, these images, these constellations images, these haughty dames cloaked in stars who are wounding their hurt pride by the sons that have left them behind because now they're in the night. I mean, he's just a genius to have come up with this. It's incredible. And it's easy to forget, I think, when I'm reading other books, and I'm enjoying most of what I read, just how this is really kind of my favorite kind of writing is this. And it's like Ringo's drumming on A Day in the Life. There's just no drumming like that. There's just nothing I've ever heard feels like that, feels like a human voice like that drumming in that song. And there's just no writing like this to me. At least I haven't found it yet. I mean, like I said, I drew comparisons with Montaigne, but Moby-Dick enters this very strange cosmic stream that just flows and glitters out into your soul. It's just incredible. This is great. There's this moment here. This is when Ahab mutters something. This is his first dialogue. Ahab doesn't really want to go down in his cabin. He says, "It feels like going down into one's tomb," he would mutter to himself. For an old captain, I don't know why he's Southern. "It feels like going down into one's tomb," he would mutter to himself. For an old captain like me to be descended into this narrow scuttle, to go to my grave-dug berth. I have too much of a E-Boy Twink's high-pitched tenor voice to do any kind of salt voice, so I apologize for that. But I wanted to read that because he's muttering to himself, but if he's muttering to himself, how can Ishmael hear him? What's happening here? Ishmael is starting to get blended away with something else, and kind of fascinating, but it's done slowly and well. Anyways, and what I said earlier about Anthony Trollope and there's no unalloyed good and there's no evil that has not some seed of what is goodly. We see that here in the sentence where some considerating touch of humanity was in him. And this is when Ahab, he patrols the deck, but of course, he's on a wooden vessel. He's got a peg leg, and every time he steps, thunk, thunk, just hits the deck, and there's sailors sleeping 6 inches below where that is. And some considerating touch of humanity was in him, for at times like these, aka at night, he usually abstained from patrolling the quarterdeck, because to his wearied mate seeking repose within 6 inches of his ivory heel, such would have been the reverberating crack and din of that bony step, that their dreams would have been the crunching teeth of sharks. I mean, again, just sentence to sentence writing. The way I just described to you how, oh man, he's walking right above them. You know what I did not say? That their dreams would have been the crunching teeth of sharks. What a way to write, if only we could all speak that way or write that way. Which I guess, if you read, you start to be able to speak that way a little bit more over time, you never know. But anyways, in this scene, Ishmael describes how Ahab, in one of his more ponderous moods, forgets that these people are going to be woken by his patrolling and his pacing. And he's pacing the deck, and Stubb kind of comes up somewhat jocularly and says, could you wad up the bottom of your peg leg, essentially, because you're making a lot of noise, and people are just sleeping right below. It's not like a crazy ask. And Ahab says, "Am I a cannonball, Stubb? that thou wouldst wad me in that fashion? But go thy ways, I had forgot. Below to thy nightly grave, where such as ye sleep between shrouds, to use ye to the filling one at last. Down, dog, and kennel! Whew. And then, of course, Stubb is offended by this. And he says, I don't like the way you're talking to me. I have like this. And then Ahab says, then I will not be tamely be called a dog, sir, is Stubb's rejection. And Ahab says, then be called 10 times a donkey, and a mule, and an ass, and be gone, or I'll clear the world of thee. And he basically intimidates Stubb into leaving. And then we get our first Shakespearean monologue of Moby-Dick, which, hell, we're in this deep, I'm going to deliver. This is what Stubb says after being just thoroughly accosted in this way. I was never so served before without giving a hard blow for it, muttered Stubb, as he found himself descending to the cabinet scuttle. It's very queer. Stop, somehow now. I don't well know whether to go back to him and strike him, or, what's that? Down here on my knees and pray for him? Yes, that was the thought coming up in me. But it would be the first time I ever did pray. He's queer, very queer. And he's queer, too. Hey, take him fore and aft. He's about the queerest old man Stubbs ever sailed with. How he flashed at me. His eyes like powder pans. Is he mad? Anyway, there's something on his mind. As sure as there must be something on a deck when it cracks. He ain't in his bed now either, more than 3 hours out of the 24. And he don't sleep then. And when I read the sentence, he ain't in his bed now either, more than 3 hours out of the 24, and he don't sleep then. This is when I first realized that Captain Ahab is Steve Donahue. Didn't that doughboy, the steward, tell me that of a morning he always finds the old man's hammock clothes all rumpled and tumbled, and the sheets down at the foot, and the coverlid almost tied into knots, and the pillow a sort of frightful hot, as though a baked brick had been on it? A hot old man! I guess he's got what some folks ashore call a conscience. It's a kind of tick-dolly row, they say, worse nor a toothache. Well, I don't know what it is, but the Lord keep me from catching it. The Lord keep Stubb from catching a conscience. That's funny. Well, I don't know what it is. Oh, well, he's full of riddles. I wonder what he goes in for, after hold for, every night, as Doughboy tells me he suspects. What's that for, I should like to know? Who's made appointments with him in the hold? Where is Ahab going? He's going into the hold. He's going into, like, a secret compartment? What is he doing? What is Ahab doing? Ain't that queer now? But there's no telling. It's the old game. Here goes for a snooze. Damn me, it's worth a fellow's while to be born into the world, if only to fall right asleep. And Stubb is not Steve Donahue. And now that I think of it, that's about the first thing babies do. And that's sort of queer, too. Stubb is spiraling. He's starting to get the Ishmael bug of just starting to think about things. You know, Stubb used to have this equanimity. He used to just kind of, sit in the jaws of death in his wailing lowered boat and just be fine. And now he's doing what Ishmael does. He's thinking, it's great to fall asleep. And you know what? Now that I think about it, babies just fall asleep is the first thing they do. That's weird. That's funny. What's happened to Stubb? He's catching the bug. Damn me. But all things are queer, come to think of them. And if we can encapsulate this book into one sentence, maybe it's that. Damn me, but all things are queer, come to think of them. But that's against my principles. Think not is my 11th commandment, and sleep when you can is my 12th. So here goes again. But how's that? Didn't he call me a dog? Blazes, he called me 10 times a donkey, and piled a lot of jackasses on top of that. He might as well have kicked me and done with it. Maybe he did kick me, and I didn't observe it. I was so taken aback with his brow somehow. It flashed like a bleached bone. What the devil's the matter with me? I don't stand right on my legs. But coming afoul of that old man a sort of turned me wrong side out. By the Lord, I must have been dreaming, though. How? But the only way is to stash it. So here goes to hammocking again, and in the morning, I'll see how this plaguey juggling thinks over by daylight. What a great... Oh my gosh, that's just so good. The whole monologue is just so beautiful. I don't even know. It's funny because it's like commentary. Obviously, I love giving commentary. Otherwise, why would I be doing this read-along? But I read that and I feel something. And hopefully you read it and you feel something. When I read it to you, God help us, I don't know what you're feeling. I don't know how many times my accent shifted. But if I were to say something about that, it wouldn't be the feeling you get from it. But But anyways, there's just full of goodness all throughout that. The thoughts on sleep, the comedy of his commandments, think not, and sleep when you can. Just a great chapter. And then, of course, we finish with chapter 30, the end of our video. The end of chapter of part 3 is the pipe, and it's a short thing. It's only this long, and it comes, of course, right after a chapter dedicated to the interaction between Ahab and Stubb, who's famous for his pipe. And in this chapter, Ahab goes upon the top deck and, is trying to smoke peacefully, and he finds that it's not soothing his soul. And in fact, as he's smoking, I guess he has his pipes, he's going smoking like that, not like this. He's blowing a windward right back into his own face and doesn't even notice. And he says, "How now?" he soliloquized at last. I mean, how now? How Shakespearean can you get? "How now?" he soliloquized at last, withdrawing the tube. "This smoking no longer soothes. Oh, my pipe, hard must it go with me if thy charm be gone." So, Ahab is descending more and more into his monomania, but he's aware of it, and he said, "Hard must it be with me." He knows it's not like a good thing. He's not insane in that way. But he says, "I'll smoke no more." He tossed the still lighted pipe into the sea. The fire hissed in the waves. The same instant the ship shot by the bubble the sinking pipe made. With slouched hat, Ahab lurchingly paced the planks. And we can hear that clunk, clunk, clunk as he walks. Ominous forebodings. Contrast to Stubb, who loves his pipe, and he gets all that equanimity from it. None to be got for poor old Ahab. And there we are. That's chapters, what is that, 21 through 30. This might be the longest one we've done so far, but I'll have to stop apologizing for it, because even if only one person watches this, and I know there's at least 2 people who will watch this, then that's worth it to talk about just a great, wonderful work of literature. So thank you so much for watching. Thank you for enduring all the things I had to say. If you disagree with anything I had to say, then you suck! Just kidding. But you should email me and talk to me about it, because, what I want this BookTube channel to be is a conversation. And it has become a conversation for so many of us. And if it's even a one-way thing, that's also a good thing, too. Because, I guess books in a way are one-way things, and those are good. Anyways, thank you so much for enjoying, hopefully, this long episode, and I hope you have a very happy New Year. I'm filming this on December 31st, and I'll probably upload it today or tomorrow once I've edited it together. But Happy New Year. Hope you have a great 2026. I hope you're healthy. I hope your family's doing well. I hope your friends are doing well. And God bless you. God bless all of the animals on the earth. Bye-bye, everyone.